student choice and how it can be one of the most amazing strategies we can use with kids. First off, let me just give you a little bit of background about me so that you know who I am and what I'm all about. So my name is Mike Anderson, obviously, and I am an educator. I have been an educator for my entire professional career, and that goes all the way back to when I was 15 years old and started teaching swimming lessons at the YMCA in my hometown of Auburn, Maine. I got hooked on working with kids back when I was in high school, knew what I wanted to do when I went to college, worked in preschools in college, did my student teaching and became a teacher right out of college. I was a public school classroom teacher for 15 years. I taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades in both Connecticut and New Hampshire. And then while I was a classroom teacher, I also got certified as a responsive classroom presenter and spent many years doing sort of part-time presenting work with responsive classroom. And then after 15 years in the classroom, decided to join that team full-time, and for 6.5 years was an author, consultant, developer, and presenter for responsive classroom and had a blast. And now for the last few years, I have been out on my own as an independent consultant and am absolutely loving it. And I'm coming to you today from Durham, New Hampshire, where I live with my awesome family, my wife Heather, who's also a teacher. We've got 2 great kids, Ethan and Carly, who just finished school. My son took his last high school final this morning, and my daughter finished 8th grade and is now officially a freshman, which is just crazy. So let me go ahead and share with you this little slide that I accidentally popped up a second ago and then popped back. Here are the basic goals for today's talk. And I know that in a short talk, it can be easy to try and take on too much, but I think I've pared it down so that we're going to hit a couple of key big ideas and goals, and we're going to do those really well. So what I want to do is share with you kind of a broad overview of choice in the classroom. What I mean by choice, how we do it, and most importantly, in some ways, why we should. I think because in some ways it feels antithetical to the way education is going right now. But I think that now is a super important time for us to think about giving kids more power and control over their learning. And so I want to share a little bit about that. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to share some concrete examples with you from across grade levels. These are both from my own classroom as well as from classrooms around the country where I've been doing consulting work and have met and worked with great teachers K through 12. I want to make sure I share a simple process with you for using choice effectively, kind of a basic framework. And then I'm going to touch on at the end of the presentation just a few strategies that can really help boost the effectiveness of choice. And then as Phil said, we'll finish off with some questions and answers, so I'll make sure to save a little bit of time at the end for those. So just so you know, although you're going to be typing in questions to Phil, I won't be able to see those questions as I go. So Phil is going to take those and kind of condense them and ask some questions at the end. And so for the next little bit, I'm just going to be doing some straight sharing, and so if you do have questions, know that those are going to Phil, but I won't be able to see them. All right, so let's start off with this big question about why we should even bother with choice to begin with. So I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about how our economy is shifting, and I know this isn't going to come as a big shock to anybody, but we are no longer in the industrial age. But if you can imagine for a moment what the industrial age economy looked like, especially when you think about the labor force, this is kind of a rough idea of what the labor force looked like. This is something I saw Sal Khan of the Khan Academy, that Sal Khan, talking about recently in a TED Talk, and it really got me thinking. So basically, the bulk of the labor force, the bulk of the people who are doing work in the industrial economy, were doing fairly low-level, rote, linear work. These were people who were working in factories, working in farms. They were producing goods, they were selling goods, they were transporting goods. And the industrial age required a massive number of people doing these really kind of straight-line linear jobs. And by linear, I mean you sort of show up in the morning, somebody else tells you what to do all day, you're managed all day, at the end of the day you punch out and you go home. So that was the bulk of the workforce. Then there was a smaller group of people who had to manage that group. So these were people who were in management. They were business leaders, they were managers in businesses, they were people who made sure that the low-skilled laborers did efficient work. They looked at the systems of business to try and be as efficient as possible. And then you had a very few people who were doing very high-level, creative, innovative thinking and work. And so you had some owners and entrepreneurs and artists and creators, people doing really highly skilled, diverse work. So this is what the this is what the industrial age economy looked like. So as I said, as you know, we're no longer in the industrial age. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about how the economy is shifting. So if you look at that low-skilled laborer pool down at the bottom of the triangle, those are the jobs that are currently being outsourced and automated in our economy. those are the jobs that are being sent overseas, or if a robot or a computer can do those jobs more efficiently or overall for less money, that's where things are going. So I was doing a lot of thinking about this, and our family was about to take a trip to Seattle for April vacation just a couple months ago. So I decided that I would pay attention to this as kind of a thought exercise, and on our trip, I would see if I could see how many times I could find instances where especially automation, because I don't think I could see outsourcing all that well, but how often I could see automation in action. Where are computers and robots taking the jobs of people? So I'm going to share some slides with you. This is going to be the worst home slideshow, like family trip slideshow ever, because it's going to be of machines and not people. But bear with me. I think you'll see the point of this in just a minute. All right, so we left for the airport, and we hadn't even got out of New Hampshire yet, and we were driving through the Easy Pass lane on the highway. So we didn't have to pay anybody cash to go through the toll. We just zipped through, and the little scanner read our car, and we went on through. Now, New Hampshire does still have a couple of people who are collecting actual money, but the number of people in the tolls overall has really dropped because of automation. So then we got to Logan Airport, and here is a kiosk where we could print our boarding pass as well as our luggage tags. Once we got to Seattle, here is my wife Heather, my daughter Carly on the train as we were heading around toward the baggage carousel area. This is an automated train, so there's nobody driving the train. It's all done through a computer. All right, here's Heather getting some tickets for us. We were going to take the water taxi in Seattle, and at this particular dock, there is nobody working to sell you a ticket. You use this kiosk, you pay with a credit card. If you happen to have cash, then you have to pay on board, so there are people there who can do that for you. But here's a place where, you know, there used to be somebody in the window taking your money and giving you a ticket, and not anymore. Now, even aboard the water taxi, there were automated messages that came up. So instead of a person giving us the safety and the welcome message, there were screens that just simply delivered a videotaped message. Okay, there's a little bit more of the same. Here we are at a train station. Heather's buying tickets for us to take the train into Seattle. If we had had an Orca card, we could have paid for our carpooling permit over there at that kiosk on the right. Now these I almost missed because they've been around for so long, but we've got an ATM where we could get cash, and there's my sister pumping gas in Seattle. So these are both ways that machines have replaced people in the workforce. And of course, every time we went to a grocery store, we had self-checkout lines in grocery stores. Now notice, these aren't completely replacing people. So there are still people checking out groceries, but there are fewer of them because you can have some of it automated. Here's my dad paying for parking at a parking garage. There is no attendant that we could see at this garage. You just simply pay with a credit card. Now here we were bowling. All right, so I almost didn't include this, and this is probably a little goofy because it was probably Fred Flintstone days when you actually had somebody in the back of those lanes that was stacking the pins and sending the ball back to you. But as we were playing, I thought, wow, yeah, there is a machine that's doing that. And so there's another example of automation in action. Here is at the Seattle Center monorail. This is actually the gift shop. I'd never seen one of these before, but it is a vending machine where you can buy t-shirts and knit caps and that sort of thing. So instead of somebody working a little kiosk there, you just put your credit card into the vending machine. All right, here is a movie that we went to see at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. And as we walked in, the guy taking our ticket, there was actually a guy taking our ticket. That was reassuring. The guy said, just so you know, the movie's going to start 5 minutes late because the first movie this morning started 5 minutes late and the whole thing runs on a continuous loop. So your movie will start 5 minutes late also. And so I realized, oh, look at that. There's nobody even working a projector. Somebody just hit play in the morning and then it just goes. All right, this is on our way back. We're almost done with the worst slideshow of a family trip ever. Here are some vending machines at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. So again, vending machines have been around forever, but it is a way that we can see that we need fewer people selling goods when we have machines that can do that. And then here are a couple of vending machines that really caught my eye. The one on the left sells you lottery tickets. And it's a little hard to see, but if you look closely on the right, you'll see that that's a Best Buy Express. So instead of a Best Buy kiosk in the airport, they just simply have a vending machine where you can get some of the most commonly purchased Best Buy items. So I thought this was all fascinating, and I was surprised, even though I was kind of going into the trip expecting to see quite a few examples, I was surprised at how many I saw. So I've continued to do a lot of thinking about our shifting economy, and here was something that caught my eye recently that I wanted to share with you. So this is from a Planet Money report that came out a couple of years ago. And it shows a map. It's actually a really interesting article if you can go find this. It's an interactive map that shows how the most common jobs have shifted over time. But what you'll notice here is that in the United States, we've got a lot of people who are driving trucks. And I've looked into this a little bit. It's a little bit misleading. Truck driver is a very broadly defined job, according to this report. So this is people who are doing local delivery. It's not just people driving 18-wheelers. I think it may also include people like FedEx and UPS delivery people. And for some reason in this report, they separate primary school and secondary school teachers into two separate categories. And so we might see more states where the most common job was teacher if they hadn't done that. But whatever, the main idea here is that there are a lot of truck drivers out there. And you may have an idea about what's coming next. You may have seen that in the headlines recently, there have been several reports of different companies who have successfully automated trucks. So this was from Wired.com, and it shows a self-driving truck making a beer delivery run. Google has done this. I think Uber has done this. I know that in Europe there are several countries that have successfully automated trucks, and these trucks have navigated the city and highway systems successfully. And so at least in these first tests, there are drivers in the trucks, but they're not at the wheel. They're in the back of the truck or nearby, and they're sort of as backup. But this is something that is coming, and it's really expected that in the next decade or two, I've seen some reports that say up to 90% of all truck driving jobs could be eliminated due to automation. So this is just another example of how our workforce is shifting. And I'm not saying that, being a truck driver isn't a skilled job, but it's a linear job, and it's one that can be replaced by a computer. And so it's going to mean a lot of people having to find different kinds of work. So here's another report, and we're almost done with this part, I swear. I just find this stuff so fascinating. So here is another report. This was done by a couple of researchers at Oxford University, and they ran some really complex math metrics to say what kinds of jobs are most likely to be automated in the coming decades. And it's really amazing to see how many different professions or how many different jobs have the potential of being automated. And a friend and I looked into these couple. I was like, wait a minute, a lifeguard? I was a lifeguard in high school. There's no way you can automate a lifeguard. But sure enough, it's already been done. There is a robot lifeguard that's basically like a tube that can go and shoot through the water at 23 miles an hour, and it's already successfully made tons and tons of rescues. And I'm a good swimmer, but I can't swim 23 miles an hour. So it's interesting if you go and just sort of Google some of these, like, can a security guard be a robot? Can a cashier be a robot? Can a chef be a robot? You'll be surprised at what comes up. So what does all of this have to do with choice? Well, so our economy is shifting, and the estimates are that this is going to speed up. As automation becomes more complex, as computers become more complex, we are going to have more and more of these linear jobs where you show up and do sort of one thing all day long and then head home in the evening. These are going to be replaced. And so if our schools continue to look and feel like factory jobs from the industrial age, so if you're a kid and you show up to school and basically you punch in, you do rote work all day long, somebody tells you what to do and you do it, and it's all about rote work and memorization, if it's all about compliance and obedience, and at the end of the day you punch out, we are failing kids. We are preparing kids for jobs of the industrial age. And so instead what we need to think about is helping school better reflect the coming economy, in which many, many, many more people are going to need to be able to do highly skilled work. They're going to have to be creative, they're going to have to be collaborative, they're going to have to be able to adapt. Most people are probably going to have to go through multiple careers because the careers and jobs are going to be shifting so rapidly. So I think this is something that really ties into our discussion today of choice, because choice is one of the ways that we can make school less linear. It's one of the ways that we can share power and control with kids and have kids be more creative and innovative and be thinking more about what they need to get out of school. And so I think that choice, it's not the only mechanism by far. There are lots of ways to do it, but it's one of the really powerful tools we have to help prepare kids for work that's going to be not quite so linear as they exit school. So now let's think more specifically about choice itself and what are some of the potential benefits of choice. So let me give you just a couple of moments to look at the screen and see if you can think about and figure out what some of these potential benefits of choice might be. So I'll be quiet just for a moment so you can think about some of these things. All right, so here they are. So what I'm going to do now is share a few key points about each of these ideas. So I'm going to give a short, direct presentation about some of the benefits of choice. And I put some of the, very intentionally, obviously, in parentheses because there are probably many other great benefits of choice. But these are just a few of the ones that, especially as I was doing research and work on this book, these are the ones that really rose to the surface. And then after I share some of these benefits, we're going to get into a little bit of the logistics of like, how do we use choice well? Because I think probably everybody gives kids choice in some capacity, but I think as a general rule, we can do it better than we usually do. And so I'll share a little bit about that in just a moment. All right, so let's start off with this idea of self-differentiation. So I think that differentiation is one of the most challenging aspects of schools today. Especially the way differentiation is usually presented to teachers. Usually when we think of differentiation, we think of having to know every kid so well that we can create 5 or 6 or 7 different learning experiences tailored to each of the kids in the room. We can somehow know exactly where they are and what they need. We'll put them into these groups, and it can quintuple our planning time, which is just impossible. And so I think that if we think of differentiation in those terms, where all of the responsibility and all of the work is on the teacher, it's one of the things that make us say, you know what, I'll differentiate next week, because right now I'm just feeling too overwhelmed. So instead, I think we can use choice as a way to help kids self-differentiate their learning. So what do I mean by that? So for those of you who are familiar with elementary school reading programs, many of the Reader's Workshop approaches out there talk about helping kids choose just right books. So that means that we're going to teach kids how to find books that they can read independently, where they know almost all of the words, and that they're really highly interested in, so that they'll be able to find a good fit to be able to practice the skills they need as great readers. So what we're doing then is we are teaching kids how to self-differentiate. Instead of the teacher being the one to figure out which kids should read which books, it's the teacher who teaches the kids how to figure out how to find their own just right books. And so that's an example of self-differentiation in action. So it's a way of helping kids learn how to put themselves into what Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development, or that just right learning zone. Some people call it the Goldilocks zone, where things aren't too easy or too hard, but they're just right. So here's an example. So this is an elementary school classroom where kids are reading books. Now they might all be reading and looking for some of the same things. They might all be looking for character development, or they might all be practicing reading fluency, but they're each doing it in books that they can read independently. And so this is an example of self-differentiation in action. So this is a great example of self-differentiation in a much different, through a different lens. So this was come up with by Jen Blair, who's a teacher I've worked with at Massabesic High School in Waterboro, Maine. And I was doing a lot of work with their school this year on using choice to help them differentiate learning for kids. And so she had seen a heat map, which is what I guess this is called. She had found this somewhere else, but she tweaked it and adapted it so that it was a way that kids could self-differentiate learning. So you'll notice that on the bottom left of this screen, there you see the color blue, and then it gets pinker and pinker as you move up and to the right. So the way this works is that the pinker you go, the harder the differential equations you get, and the bluer you go, the easier that you get. So all of the students were practicing the skill of differential equations. But what Jen said to the students was, you need to find the problems that give you that really good, appropriate push. Like they're challenging enough to be fun, they're challenging enough to make you sweat a little bit, but that you can still do them. And then she was going to walk around and coach. And so she said, so if you pick one that's right in the middle and it ends up being too hard, well then go a little bluer in the next one. Or if you pick one that's a little bit blue and it ends up being too easy, then you know to move a little bit pinker. So she was using this as a vehicle to help kids self-differentiate their own learning, which was so cool. Okay, here's another one of the potential benefits, which is that kids can tap into their intrinsic motivation when we use choice. So I believe that all kids are already self-motivated. All kids have intrinsic motivation. When I worked as in a preschool classroom all through college, I never once saw a 3 or a 4-year-old walk through the door unmotivated. They all came in with a plan. They wanted to use the blocks, they wanted to build, they wanted to paint, they wanted to go to the dress-up and dramatic play area. But typically, as kids go through school, they lose some of this intrinsic motivation. They lose their fire. And and passion for learning. And one of the reasons that happens is because more and more as kids get older and older, they're simply told what to do, and school becomes an exercise in compliance. So when we give kids choices about what they want to learn or how they want to learn it, we can help rekindle that passion and that fire for learning. And I've seen this happen in my own classroom, and I've seen it happen around the country in schools that I've worked with, and it's so exciting to see. So let me just give you a really personal example. I talk about this in the beginning of the book. This is a cell pillow that my son came up with. So in 6th grade, his science teacher gave the assignment of spending a week practicing diagramming a cell. And she gave all kinds of choices. She said you can use pen and ink, you could use a computer drawing program, you could do collage or cut and paste, or if you have another idea, you can share one with me. And so my son, Ethan, said to his teacher, Miss Bissell, hey, what do you think? Could I make a pillow and make a cell pillow? And she said, sure, go ahead. And so my son, who is usually not very motivated when it comes to homework, spent 7 hours one week crafting this cell pillow. As you can see, he did a beautiful job. Well, he's now in 9th grade. Well, he just finished 9th grade. He's going into 10th. He can still name all of the parts of this cell pillow, and it still is in his room right now, because he spent so much time and thought really working at this. Now, if he had chosen something that was quick and easy, if he'd been assigned something that he didn't want to do, he would have done it, he would have done the bare minimum, and he probably wouldn't have learned much. But this project allowed him to tap into a passion that he had, which was for crafting, and do a really amazing job. Here's an example from a Spanish class that I was working in this year. So this teacher was just finishing off in a Spanish 2 class. They were just finishing one unit, they were about to move on to the next. And so she crafted 4 really simple choices for students. One was for speaking, one was for listening, one was for reading, and one was for writing. And she said, think about where you're at right now in your learning of Spanish, and think about 2 of these areas that you most need to practice, and then choose those 2 areas to work on during this class period. She gave a quick demonstration of each, and the kids got right to work. They were so motivated. And I went over and talked to one kid and said, hey, what's up? Tell me why you chose this one. And he was choosing a reading piece. He said, I really need to practice reading. I'm struggling with that, and I really need to do this. So it was so cool to see him choosing something that he really knew that he needed to work on. Okay, another potential benefit of choice when we use it well is that we can see a reduction in misbehaviors. I got to tell you that 9 times out of 10, when I see students who are misbehaving in school, especially chronically, kids who are melting down on a regular basis, or kids who are often sort of itchy and having a hard time sitting still, it very often stems from the fact that the work itself isn't all that inspiring, or they just don't care about the work. And when school leaders call me and say, hey, Mike, would you come and work with our school on effective and respectful discipline practices? We have a lot of kids who are struggling with misbehavior. One of my first questions is, I want to know who is misbehaving, because usually it's not all the kids, usually it's a pocket of them. And then from that pocket who are struggling with behavior, I want to know what their academic work looks like. And very often what I find is that it's students who are in special ed and remedial settings who are most struggling with misbehavior. And schools, in a well-meaning attempt to support these kids, have broken the learning down into bite-sized, rote, and meaningless pieces so that it would be almost impossible to find engagement in them. And so usually when I go into work in the schools and we're going to work on effective and respectful discipline, we've got to think about how are we going to make the academics more engaging, and choice is one of the ways we get there. So in this picture that you see here, this is Heather, a teacher also in Waterboro, Maine, who decided to allow students to craft their own science assessment at the end of a unit. And so in each of the 3 areas they'd worked on in this lab skills class, they had to pick 5 of the short activities and problems she'd put together. What I didn't know when I was observing in here was that she had a student who often was so disruptive that he shut down learning for everybody in the classroom. But in this particular day, he was spot on. I couldn't tell that there was a kid in there who struggled with behavior. And I talked to him, actually, just not even realizing that he struggled, and was asking him about what he'd chosen. And he said to me, oh, usually we do worksheets, and I hate doing worksheets, and I get to do something with my hands, and I really like working with my hands. And so when the teacher and I were talking afterwards, she was reflecting on how it made such a huge improvement in his behavior that he got to do something and pick something that he liked. So that's just another example. Okay, let's think about a couple other ideas. Learning itself can actually be deeper and richer when we give kids more power and control over their learning. And this is true for a couple of reasons. First of all, brain research has shown that when students are joyfully engaged in work, their brains are better able to process learning and store it in long-term memory. And you can see that in Judy Willis's book, Research-Based Strategies to Ignite Student Learning. Eric Jensen, who's done a lot of work on learning in the brain, has also cited choice as one of the key strategies to use to help tap into kids' passion for learning and boost learning effectiveness. There are some other reasons. I mean, obviously, when kids are more motivated, so when they have some choice and they've got some buy-in and they're more motivated, they're going to learn more deeply. But there's another reason, and it's not something that's necessarily obvious. So my buddy Andy has this term. He calls it collateral learning. So he said when it's the learning that happens around the edges, that you don't necessarily plan for, it's not intentional, but it's often some of the richest and deepest learning. And it happens when kids are talking to each other about what they're doing. Well, if everybody's doing the same thing at the same time in the same way, it's very hard to have any collateral learning. The task has set a bar or a limit or a ceiling on what can be learned because everybody's doing the same thing. But when kids have choice and they're all engaged in learning in different ways, the learning in the room becomes so much richer and more vibrant because the kids are learning from each other and seeing things in different perspectives. So here's an example from my classroom. This girl on the left is Phoebe. She was doing a book project and she created this thing she called a quadrama. And if you just Google quadrama, you'll see all kinds of plans that come up. So this quadrama is a little bit like a diorama, but it allows for 4 different scenes to be showed at once. So she shared this in a reading, and yet she did a book project, she shared it with the class, and the kids were so fascinated by the quadrama. So she held a little mini workshop for how to create quadramas so that other kids could use them in their projects. So this is just a great example of how the learning is richer and deeper when it's not just the teacher who has to come up with all the good ideas, but when the kids have some choice and they have some ways of sharing good ideas, all of a sudden we've got 25 people thinking about really cool creative work in the room, and the room just becomes a richer, more vibrant learning environment. All right, another potential benefit when choice is used well is that we can have better social emotional learning. So kids are sometimes better able to practice skills and develop social emotional skills in the context of rich and appropriately challenging work. There are a few social emotional skills that I think are especially important here. So one is grit. Angela Duckworth is doing some amazing research on this topic out of the University of Pennsylvania. And she defines grit as perseverance in pursuit of a passion. So when you're showing like really hard work skills or a hard work ethic, but it's in service of what somebody else is making you do, that's not necessarily showing grit. I think that's just hardcore compliance. True grit has to come from within. So if you're truly being gritty, if you're truly being perseverant, it means that you're pursuing something that you care deeply about. And that, I think, is really important. So that can better be tapped into when kids have choice. Oftentimes, kids learn empathy and collaboration skills when involved in choice because they see kids learning in different ways and they start to understand that everybody's a little bit different and that's okay. And there's a whole category of social emotional learning skills called effective decision making. And when choice is used well, we're actively teaching kids the skills of how to make good choices and helping them reflect on the choices they've made so they can be practicing this skill of effective decision making. It's important to recognize that social emotional learning skills are the keys to the kingdom. These are the skills that businesses are looking for. And if we think about that triangle that we want to flip that I shared about a little while ago, it's the skills of communication and working well with other people and being adaptable and having a strong work ethic and being able to listen to others and learn from them. These are the skills that are going to be most important in the coming economy, and these are the very skills that we can help kids practice through choice when done well. Okay, and then this is the final, but certainly not the least important potential benefit that we're going to talk about. When we give kids more choice and they're active and they're engaged and they're learning more, we have more fun. It's so much more fun to show up to work in the morning when our kids are jazzed about learning and when they're being highly successful. And this is something that I've seen over and over again as I go into working with teachers in schools, is even just after a couple of PD sessions, after teachers go and they try a little bit of choice, the teachers themselves come back so energized. In fact, in one school that I went to, in the second session that we were having, I was just about to start and this teacher slammed her hand down on the desk. We all jumped. And she said, "Mike, I got to tell you something. I'm retiring at the end of this year. But after this last couple of weeks, I'm having so much fun, I don't even want to retire anymore." And everybody laughed. And I thought it was a great illustration of how choice can help reinvigorate our teaching, which is so important. So here are some of the potential benefits of choice when choice is done well. And if you want to learn more about these, of course, you can go and check out the book. There are lots more examples in there. And now I kept using a term as I was giving that presentation, when choice is used well. So that begs the question, what do I mean? How do you use it well? And so that's what I'd like to share a little bit about next. So in order to use choice well, I think that we would do well to consider a three-part process. So when we're using choice with kids, first off, we have to help them make a good choice. We can't just say, okay, kids, here are three choices, now choose, and have them run at it. They need to slow down and think about what they're choosing and why. How does this fit with what I need as a learner? How does this fit with my interests? Which one will be the most engaging for me? Which one will best help me learn what I need to learn? So we kind of slow down that first step and help them think about the choices before they make them and then make them well. Then in the next phase, in the do phase, this is where the kids go out and do the work. And so they follow through on the choice that they made. And then in the final phase, this is also, I would say, just as important as the choose phase. We need to slow down again and give students the opportunity to think about what they did and think about what went well and what could have been better. Did they make a good choice, and how do they know? If they had to do this choice again, would they choose the same thing or not? Would they choose something different? And so it's giving them a chance to review, to slow down and reflect and think about their learning. This is how we help them become better decision makers so that they'll get better and better at self-differentiating and guiding their own learning. So this is a three-part process that we can use with our students. And it is part of a three-part process that we can use ourselves. So as teachers, the first thing we need to do is create good choices. We've got to make sure that we give them choices worth choosing in the first place. I was working with one middle school teacher, and as we were doing some planning, he suddenly stopped and looked up. He said, I just realized giving kids 4 bad choices would be worse than giving them no choice at all. And it's so true. So we first need to create good choices, and I'll share a little bit about what I mean about that in just a second. Then we facilitate the choose, do, review process, and then we engage in some professional reflection. So after we've given choice and we've had the activity, we think back and say, what went well, what could have been better? We had 25 kids and 21 of them all chose the same thing. Why did that happen? How did that work? Why are they all choosing that one? And we engage in professional reflection, and this is what helps us get better and better and better as teachers at the skill and craft of creating good choices and implementing choice well with our students. So I said back here that we have to create good choices, and so now let's talk just a little bit about what good choices are all about. And I'm not going to go into great depth in this just because I want to make sure we have time for some questions and answers, but I at least need to share these 3 key ideas. So good choices need to hit all 3 of these criteria. First and foremost, they need to match our learning goals. So we need to think first, as we're creating choices, what do we want kids to learn, or what do we want our students to get out of this experience? And that's where we begin. So then we think about a few different ways that they might be able to hit that learning target or hit that learning standard or that learning objective. So we begin with the goals. And then we also think about our students. What do we know about our kids, and how do we help tap into their interests and their strengths in service of those learning goals? And then importantly, we also need to think about our own logistics. We need to make sure that we're crafting lessons and choice experiences that aren't going to kill us with planning. If we have 3 really good options for, let's say, a math lesson, and then there's a 4th idea that we have that's going to take an hour extra to plan, forget it. Let's just do the 3 that are already good, and we can save that 4th one for another time. So our choices need to match the goals that we have for learning, what we know about our students, and our realistic logistics around time and space and energy and planning. So here are a couple of examples of some potential choices we might offer. So let's say that we want all students to practice the skill of persuasive writing. We might allow them to choose to either work alone or with a partner. I'm not necessarily saying we should let them choose their partner. In fact, I would say we probably shouldn't let them choose their partner. But they might get to choose, would I better practice persuasive writing on my own, or would I be better served as a writer by practicing with somebody else? We might give them a choice of topic. We might have 3 or 4 topics for them to choose from, or maybe as a class we brainstorm a list of things we might write persuasively about, and then students choose from that list. We might allow them to choose their subgenre of writing. Do they want to write an essay or a blog or an op-ed? Or, there are lots of different ways they can write persuasively. We might also offer a choice about how they prepare for writing before they get going into the draft. Do they want to outline some of their ideas or use a web or some other kind of graphic organizer? Now, to be clear, I wouldn't give all of these choices all at once. That would probably be too overwhelming. We might just give one or two for a class, especially as they're just getting into choice. Maybe once they're more skilled, they might be able to handle more complex choice. All right, on the other side of the screen, you'll see another example, this one from math. Let's say all students are going to practice the skill of solving word problems that involve money. We might give them, maybe there's already a page in the math workbook that we have, and we say, out of these 25 problems, let's all practice for 15 minutes. Pick and choose the problems that you think will give you that just right push. Or we might create 3 sets of problems. I did this in an algebra class where I went in and did a demo lesson. I created several different worksheets that each had a different complexity level around the skill that the kids are practicing in algebra. And then their job was to choose the problems and choose the pages that they thought were the just right fit. We might also give students the choice of using actual physical money to use as they solve the problems or not, depending on what was best for their learning needs in that moment. So those are just a couple of examples of how we might craft good choices. Notice that we always start with the learning goal. How do we solve word problems that involve money? How do we help kids practice persuasive writing? That's always the starting point. Okay, and then before we finish off and do some questions and answers, I'd also just like to share a couple of other ideas. When I was writing the book, I said to my editor, there are these 3 big ideas I want to talk about, and it's almost like I want to say, if you don't do these 3 things, don't even bother with choice. And she said, you know, Mike, you can't say it that way in the book. You got to soften it a little bit, which I understand. So these are, I would say, 3 characteristics or 3 strategies we can use that will boost the effectiveness of choice, and they all flow together and feed into each other. So we need to create safe and supportive learning environments. We need to create environments where kids know that if they make a choice, they're not going to get laughed at for their choice. If my son in 6th grade had been worried about getting laughed at for creating a pillow, for doing a sewing project as a 6th grade boy, he wouldn't have chosen that. And he would have chosen something that probably didn't match his learning needs as well, and he probably wouldn't remember what he still remembers about the cell. So we need to create safe and supportive learning environments for our students. We also need to help boost student ownership. If kids, especially if they've been in school for a while and they have this idea that it's the teachers who own the work and they're just doing the work that the teachers have assigned, it can take a while to break them out of that routine. So we need to do some things to help them reclaim their ownership of work. And we can do that through the language that we use, through how we design our classrooms. We can reduce the use of incentives that we have in schools. Anytime we have an incentive where we're saying, if you do this, then you get this, we're basically saying you're working for me and I'm going to pay you for the work, which diminishes their ownership. We need to relook at assessment and grading. Those are often ways that increase the idea that the work is all about the teachers. So, you know, these are some really important ideas to consider if we want to help kids be able to truly own their learning so that they're making choices for the right reason. And then a really key point of using choice well is that we've got to give kids the opportunity to think about their own thinking. We have to teach them how to learn. So we have to build their metacognitive skills and teach them about the zone of proximal development and help them really develop a growth mindset so that they can take on these choices in ways that are really appropriate, so that they have the skill to do that. So let me just close down with a few final thoughts, and then we'll do some questions to finish things off. So one final thought I have is that remember that choice is a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. We don't give choice just for the sake of giving choice. We give choice to boost student engagement in learning and to help them self-differentiate their work so that they're spending more time in that appropriate learning zone. We also have to go beyond just giving kids choices. We have to teach students how to choose well and how to reflect on those choices. We can maximize the impact of choice by using that 3-part process of choose, do, review, and especially remembering that choose and review part that are so critical. And then we need to create conditions where choice can thrive, where kids feel safe and supported, where they feel true ownership of their work, and also where they have the skills to understand themselves well enough as learners to be able to make effective choices. So I know we're going to finish off with some questions and answers, but I wanted to make sure to put this up. If you want to learn more about using choice effectively, of course, you can check out my book. There's actually a free study guide for that book on the ASCD website. So if you go to ascd.org and either type in my name or type in the title of the book, you'll see that there's a study guide connected with the book so that schools can use it as a study group book. You'll see my email and website are both there. I'm on Twitter. I also have a lot of Pinterest boards for those of you on Pinterest. So if you'd like to go and check out some of the Pinterest boards, I have one specifically all about choice called Learning to Choose, Choosing to Learn. So I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. I hope you've got some ideas that you might take back to your teaching. And I am ready for some questions.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was great. Everyone listening in, feel free to type in your questions now. It's in that questions box and go to webinar. I know a few of you have already done that to kind of kick things off. And Mike, I wanted to start with the easiest question, which just involves pulling up an old slide. So Kayleen was trying to get down, there was one slide where you were showing skills that businesses are looking for. Do you remember the slide I'm talking about?
I sure do.
There we go, perfect. So we'll keep that one up as more questions are coming in, but she wanted to jot that one down.
Sure, and just so she and everybody else knows, this is just one of many such examples. There are so many different resources out there that are showing the same kind of thing. So this is from one telephone survey done by Northeastern University, but there are lots and lots of examples of this very skill set that businesses are looking for.
Then we have a question from Karen, and she's wondering about any suggestions for rolling this out with second graders.
Yes, absolutely, Karen. And I would say this is true of just about all of the grades, especially as we think about rolling it out at the beginning of the year. We want to make sure that we roll things out really slowly and gently. So we don't, on the first day of school, want to give kids this huge multi-step choice project. It's going to be too overwhelming. At the beginning of the year, we want to have things really safe and secure, and so we're really in charge and control of most of the learning. But we might, in second grade, give kids the choice of using crayons or colored pencils or markers to create a name tag for themselves. And that can be a way to just start to give a little bit of choice. And we might say, think about which of those materials might be a good one for you to use to create a really nice name tag for yourself, or to create a hopes and dreams paper for yourself, or to draw a picture that shares a little bit about yourself. And so by starting off the year with really small bite-sized choices and helping kids reflect on choices, we can both build our own skill set slowly and really practice that three-step process, but also help children ease into the idea of them having more power and control over their learning. And then by the time we get to December and January, we're ready to fly with cool independent projects and lots of great writing and reading choices.
That's great. We also have a lot of questions around an idea, which I'm going to try to do my best to summarize. And I think you kind of just touched on it. But now that we're in summer and the school year for most folks is about to start in August, is there something that is there, I guess, one thing that you would want everyone on the line to do differently as they start the school year in August?
I guess one key idea, it's something that I see happen as I work with teachers in schools, is we're often so confined by our curriculum or by our standards or our curricular guides, especially those sort of lockstep gross teacher programs that we're all supposed to start on lesson 1 on day 1 and then do lesson 2 on day 2, those scripted curricula. Those things can really kind of shut down our creativity. And as I work with teachers, what I find is that as we start to get better and better at using choice and they try it more and more, it's like they're almost unlocking their own creative juices a little bit. So I would encourage teachers to begin the year by thinking a little bit more openly about the activities you're doing and always asking the question, like, why are we doing it this way? And are there other ways that kids could accomplish the same goal? And so to start thinking in terms of choice, like what choices might we give given whatever activity or lesson or unit that we're engaged in? And I think that mindset shift around, how might we give kids choice? Are there other ways to get to this learning objective? Can be a good starting point for everyone.
Oh, that's a great suggestion.
Thanks.
Karen this is going to be we got lots of tough questions for you here.
I love them. Bring them on.
So Karen is asking, how do you change from extrinsic to intrinsic rewards? Where should a teacher start with that?
Oh my gosh, Karen, how long do we have? So, It's really interesting that, and it's an important question because as I'm working in schools, this is one of the things that we often have to tackle. Schools so often have systems of extrinsic rewards set up. And research is really clear. Extrinsic rewards diminish intrinsic motivation. There's just no debate about that in the field of psychology or sociology. There are all kinds of books out there about this. And so one of the things that I did in my own teaching, so I started off my teaching career using token reward systems. And once I realized the damage they were doing, I just stopped. And I told my students why. I said, you know what I've realized is these things sometimes get in the way. And we end up worrying more about how do we get tokens instead of how do we do a great job of learning. And so we're still going to have fun parties every now and then. We're going to go out and play kickball on a nice day. And we're going to have pizza for lunch as a treat. But we're not going to use it a reward system to get us there. That'll just be a fun celebration that we do because we love being in school together. And we're going to focus our energies on how do we care about the work and love the work. And so it seems a little overly simplistic, and so I apologize, Karen, for that. We don't have enough time to get into more of the details about how to do it. But sometimes, just tearing off the Band-Aid and saying we're just not going to use these systems anymore, and instead we're going to use choice as a way to open up kids' intrinsic motivation. And then we realize that sometimes that's harder, because sometimes waving a treat in front of kids and saying, if you do this, then you'll get an extra recess, or if you do this, and you'll get an A+, it's a quick and easy way to get them into compliance. But what it also does is train them to rely on other people to get them to do stuff. And they lose their own intrinsic motivation, and that's serious damage done to kids. So I would say choice as a replacement for those systems is a good place to start.
And Barbara is asking, when you talk about kids reflecting on choices, do you do this as a mini conference or a writing activity?
It could be either one. There are lots of ways to do it. So let's say at the beginning of the school year in a reader's workshop in 5th grade, one of the things we're doing a lot of reflecting on is, have you chosen just right books and how do you know? And so we might gather together in the circle and I might ask a few people to share their thinking about that. Or I might have them all turn and talk with a partner and share about, do you think the book that you were reading today was a just right book and how do you know? Or in the reading journal on a Friday, so I can review them over the weekend, I might have them do a short little written piece of the books in your book bag. Which ones do you think are especially just right and why? So we might have kids turn and talk. We might have them do silent reflections. We might use something like a thumbs up, thumbs down, or fist to 5. We might have a whole group discussion. And with longer, bigger projects, after a 6-week independent research unit, we might have a self-assessment rubric where students are going back and analyzing different elements of their work and thinking about what went well and what could have been better. And so it might be much more elaborate. After a 15-minute math activity, it might just be a quick, turn and talk with a partner. Do you think you made a good math choice today and how do you know? So it's really going to depend on the learning goals and the logistics of the work.
And I think you just answered this other question from Rebecca, but I want to ask it just in case there's anything you want to add. Rebecca was curious about how do we make sure students are choosing something that's challenging for the just right push rather than picking the quickest, easiest choice to get the task done?
Yeah, this is such an important question, and I'm glad it's been asked. What I've found is that kids typically choose what's quickest and easiest when one of a couple of things are happening. Either when they're trained to do work for incentives. So if they're working for a grade and the goal is to get an A, and we say, choose your own math problems, but the way to get an A is to not make mistakes, kids are going to choose the quickest, easiest thing because they're just working to get the A, the goal is to get the A, and the goal isn't to do the work. Or if the environment doesn't feel safe, if kids are worried about being made fun of if they make mistakes, if they're worried about choosing what seems like a girl or a boy thing when they're the other gender, that's when kids can have a hard time making good choices. And so I think if we work on creating learning environments that are safe and supportive, and then helping remove some of those extrinsic motivators that get in the way of intrinsic motivation, we're getting somewhere. And Rebecca, it's important to know that kids will make mistakes. And that's part of learning how to be good at making choices, is sometimes you choose something that's too easy and sometimes you choose something that's too hard. And if I could just go back to this slide real quick. If we think about those too hard and too easy places, if you choose something that's too easy and you finish it and it doesn't require any work or effort at all, it gets boring pretty quick. Like I love to play games like Bejeweled and Candy Crush on my phone, but now that I'm at level 100, I don't go back to level 1 and just play it over and over again to feel good about myself. It's boring to do something that you can already do easily. And when you move into something that's way too hard and frustrating, it's also a place where you disengage because you very quickly increase your stress levels, you feel badly, it's not fun, and you're not learning. And so when the conditions are right, and when we set choice up well, and when we help kids practice how to make good choices, they'll get better and better at making just right ones. But part of the process is that some kids are going to struggle with that. And then we get to do some individual coaching and help them learn the skill of how to put themselves into that just right zone. But there's no way it's going to happen magically on the first time. And so that's just part of the deal.
And I want to give everyone a quick update on timing here since we have about 5 minutes left. We have so many great questions. So what I'm going to try to do here is I think we'll do probably about 2 more questions here. I'll try to be really selective in the ones that we get. Then we will, of course, thank Mike for his time, and then we'll jump into just a quick 1-minute flash overview of Front Row. So with that, now I better choose these questions wisely because I know I'm going to upset some people if I don't get to their questions.
I want you to think really carefully about which ones you're going to choose, Phil. Make sure you're choosing ones that are right for the audience, that'll inform our learning.
That's right. It's very good that I'm doing, I'm going to make a good choice for this webinar. So Marlene, I think, asked a question that sums up a lot of the other questions. And she says, is there a place for rote learning and memorization of material? For example, spelling words and knowing location of states and capitals. How can this method apply to this type of knowledge learning?
So I think there's less of a place for rote learning in schools than there once was, because we all have devices in our pockets where if we need to know that rote information, we can just look it up. And we have mechanisms like spell check that enable us to spell things well, even if we don't have the spelling words memorized. That being said, I think that there is still a place for it because there's a skill of learning how to memorize something that's really important. And that whatever job we have, whatever role we're going to have outside of school, we're probably going to have some key content that we have to be able to memorize. There's some kind of process we're going to have to learn. There's some kind of content or information we're going to have to memorize. So what I would say is, let's give kids some more choices about what they're memorizing so that we're practicing the skill of memorization, so that the content is more of the vehicle for practicing the skill. So let's take spelling words, for example. I don't think there's a lot of research out there that shows that memorizing spelling words actually leads to great spellers. But we could use that as a way of practicing the skill of memorization. We could have kids choose out of their reading books 5 or 6 or 10 words that they want to practice memorizing because they're going to give themselves an appropriate push with those words. And then each kid could practice memorizing their own set of words. Now we're practicing spelling words. Kids are being able to, they're self-differentiating around that rote content. So I think that that's one way that we might there's still a place for that rote content, but I don't think that it's necessarily an important skill for all kids to memorize the same set of content. That's something that's really shifting as the information age really comes about.
And Mike, one thing that you can't see in GoToWebinar that I can see is that just so many people have been writing in their appreciation to you and your answers and your presentation, and so many people have been writing thank you in all caps with lots of exclamation points. I know people got a lot out of the presentation, and one thing that I wanted to make sure that everyone knew is just if they want to learn more and if they want to get your book, is the best place to do that? Is that on your website?
The website is a good landing place for everything. So there's a link to my book. Okay. There's a link to my email. People are welcome to reach out to me with further questions through email. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in having me come and work in your school or with your district, my website's a good spot. So if you go to leadinggreatlearning.com, that's sort of the entryway to everything else.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I'll read you some of these just so you know I'm not making it up. Jennifer says, thank you in all caps. Britta says, thank you for a great webinar. Megan says, this has been so useful. So kind of across the board, people are so appreciative of your time. So
wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining us for this, Mike. We really appreciate it. since the question has come up a few times because people got so much out of this, yes, we will definitely record it and we'll send it around to you. And some of the information you're seeing here on the screen, we'll kind of summarize that and email it to you too for those of you that aren't able to get it down right now. And that way you can always find Mike's information later too. So Mike, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Phil. It's been a real pleasure.
And on that note, for those of you that are curious to learn more about Front Row, I know many of you probably already use us. And if that's the case, you can sign off now and I will not be offended. But for any of you that did want to learn a little bit more, I'm about to try to press my luck and do the world's fastest overview of Front Row since we are at time now. So you can see how well I do trying to summarize our entire company here in 1 minute. Just give me a second just to pull things up on my side. And before I just start talking, since I did just change the screen, can someone write in and can you type into the questions box, can you just type in Piggy, since our mascot is a piggy? So let me know if you can see my screen, which is a light blue screen that says learning to choose, choosing to learn. Oh, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so here I go with the world's fastest overview. Let me put this into full screen mode. So before I go into kind of some of the nitty gritty in the last 15 seconds of my overview, I just want you to know about what our mission is. So our mission at Front Row is really simple. We want to ensure that every student gets a world-class education. And we're really fortunate to work with over 10,000 districts, actually over 6 million students, over 350,000 teachers. So we're really looking to help every student get a world-class education. The way that we think that we're going to do that is really through working with teachers and empowering teachers to reach every one of their students. Most of us here at Front Row used to be teachers, including myself. I used to teach the 5th grade. So we're really passionate about helping teachers. We want every student to work at their own level, at that zone of proximal development that Mike was talking about in math, ELA, and social studies, and all of that happens automatically. As a teacher, it's really easy for you to track the student and classroom level progress, so you'll know exactly how your students are performing across all the domains and all of the standards. And then we make it really easy for administrators to kind of view performance across entire schools. And so we've kind of become a one-stop shop for all classroom needs. So like I said, we cover math, ELA, and social studies, and even in those, there's a whole lot that we offer that obviously we don't have time for today, but some that I'll call out is, benchmark assessments. On the ELA side, we have reading and writing. So you can assign an article to your class, and every student will get the grade level of the article that's best for them, and all of that happens automatically. They can practice vocab, they have benchmark assessments. On the social studies side, we have a lot of units that you can use. And I think I've left out kind of some of the best part is all of this is available for free for teachers. We obviously have a paid version that you can upgrade to, but most of our teachers use this on the free version and absolutely love it. We're also, this is the thing that I think gets me the happiest as a former teacher, that we're the only adaptive program that has a perfect 5-star teacher rating on the Common Sense website. Obviously, we have nothing to do with Common Sense. It's a third-party review site, and so we're really proud of that, that all teachers on that site have really enjoyed working with us. And of course, people at the district level really enjoy working with Front Row too. So I'm short on time. I won't read this out loud to you, but really proud to work with Helen Hill, who's the Director of Curriculum at Pasadena Unified. We also have lots of principals who really like us, like Kathy Teeter at Lincoln Elementary. And then, of course, we have our coaches and tech specialists who really enjoy using Front Row as well. Now, I just want to end with this, since you've had to hear my voice for a lot of the presentation, at least at the beginning and the end. But I guess I never actually introduced myself. So my name is Phil, and here's my email address. So if you're curious at all about anything about Front Row, please just send me an email. I promise to respond to each and every question that you have. And so with that, I wanted to wrap up the webinar. Just let you know again that we'll be sending out the recording to the presentation probably mid next week. If you have any questions, email them to me. You had Mike's information from earlier. I know that he's genuinely interested in hearing from you all and helping you all. So please feel free to reach out directly to him too. On that note, I'm going to sign off. Please have a great Friday. For all of you teachers, I hope you're enjoying your summer. For all of you district administrators, I hope that you're going to enjoy your weekend, because I know you're going to be back hard at work next week. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.